This week's topic is actually going to be 3 mini topics. Now, what are those 3 mini topics? It's going to be our conference topic. So what we're going to do is we are going to go through each person's conference topic, and we're just going to discuss it a little bit, just to give you a conference preview of what's going to be there. So I will start first, and then we'll go to Oz, and then we'll just keep going down the list. So I'm going to start. Now, my conference talk is about principles to create outstanding spreadsheet models, and one of the interesting things about this topic is that I am not going to present any formulas or code. You know, there's not going to be any hands-on stuff. It's going to be all conceptual, and what this allows me to do is say, hey, let's take a step back. You know, this isn't just about doing things on the spreadsheet. It's about thinking about the problem differently. Now, I just want to present one of the things, because I love railing against things, especially when they're considered conventional thought. But I'm going to switch over here because I have a big thing about worksheet tab names, and I'm going to talk about this in my talk, but hopefully you can all see my screen. So at bestpracticemodeling.com, they have this spreadsheet standards review board, or so they're called, and they have these all. I'm going to just try to zoom in here so you can see this. So they have different suffixes that are very similar to when you code in VBA that they think you should add to your worksheet tab name. So if we have a revenue summary sheet title, they think you should say revenue or rev underscore BO, BO being blank outputs. Okay, so here's what I'm here to tell you. Don't do this. Please do not do this, because my argument here is that you should use the words revenue summary, because that is far more descriptive than this engineering speak that is offset by an underscore, which isn't even really necessary. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Not everyone's going to agree with that, I know, but I really want people to start thinking about spreadsheet models and modeling data differently and try to move away from the engineering speak and more towards descriptive language. So I'll open it to the panel to tell me your thoughts, and you guys can tell me why you think I'm wrong.
Anyone?
Oz.
No.
You got nothing?
Nothing.
You guys agree with me? You guys agree with me? Is that it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to be in there. I'm going to be in Chandu's presentation.
Well, how do you know it's at the same time? You're just going to tell I'm going to be like, you come and you're like, no, I'm going to go to Chandu's. I'm going to ask you every time to come. You're like, I'm going to Chandu's. Anyone have any thoughts about doing things, you know, modeling differently, breaking convention, you know, trying to make things more readable?
You know, I'll tell you that, you know, in reading your book, you know, I could see where this is kind of so anybody who's picked up your book, right? The first several chapters are all about this, right? It's all about what is convention right now, and what are some different ways that you could structure code? What's different ways you could structure different things? So I think I think it would be interesting to go there and to listen to you kind of put this all together, because any of those elements kind of taken by themselves, you could argue, right? But once you kind of put the kind of strategy, and one thing leads to the second, leads to the third, and you can kind of see how this all kind of plays out. I think it's worthwhile.
Well, that's just one small facet, but the main argument is that the best Excel models have good design and layout, so like, you know, kind of Edward Top data visualization, keep the junk off, good code and formulas, get rid of, you know, volatile formulas that don't help, and good like naming practices, and then the last bit is good data visualization. So that's that's the argument of my talk. In fact, that's the essence of it. You don't even need to go anymore.
Good modeling. Good modeling. Okay.
So what about you?
Do you have a second topic as well?
I do, but I don't want to give that away. I don't want to give that away totally yet. I'll say it's about how we make bad decisions with data, and how we need to place data analysis correctly into our decision making. Here, I'll give you one real quick insight on that. So you guys, so like, you know, Moneyball is held up as this like standard of great data modeling, but you know, the Oakland A's didn't really make it. They didn't make it to the World Series. The real thing about it was that he was able to use these, or Billy Beane used these econometrics stuff to figure out how to get good baseball players very cheaply. But it didn't really make the team much better. It just made it more affordable. And then the other one is the Netflix challenge. Netflix had this challenge years ago about how to to make a better recommendation engine. and they had all these data teams. So it was this big $1 million challenge. They had all these data modeling teams, and this team came up with this awesome machine learning algorithm, and they got $1 million for it. It was held up as the gamification example, the example of big data. It was held up as like the precursor of everything we love about like our current big data world we live in right now. And the truth is it was too computationally expensive for Netflix to implement, so they never implemented it. In fact, the recommendations you see when you watch Netflix are based off of humans watching it and categorizing them.
Gotcha.
So these are the misunderstandings we have about data.
Wow. Now that's really cool.
Well, actually, that kind of. Go ahead, Oz.
No, I just think that, man, think about, the book I'm writing now. I'm painting a real world context around things that we talk about different tricks and tips and tools and different things, but then reality hits and you don't have the money, you don't have the time, somebody's going on vacation and you got to figure something out. So all this grandiose stuff, well, it's great until somebody says, I'm not paying for that. Now what do you do? So I like those examples you gave, because it shows, the real world constraints on things, and that there might not be anything really fancy behind there after all. There's people getting stuff done as best they can.
Yeah, I mean, we often forget there's a human element. I mean, reduce it to its parts, whether it's this talk or my other talk. I'm just trying to make things more accessible to humans, not engineers who aren't human. No, I'm just joking about that. But I'm just kidding. We have a hate mail email line that you guys can send your stuff to. So, any thoughts on that, Denise?
Well, actually, I think it's an important point, because this goes back to the data being useful to people, right? So it's all, if the humans can't do something with it, or the humans don't understand what the story you're telling even, right? So you can have the most brilliant predictive model in the world, right? It can be tuned to within an inch of its life, but if you can't explain to an executive what that model's really telling you about your customers or whatever you're studying, then it's not really worth much, right? So I think the human element is so important, and actually, if I can bring it back to the conference for a second, one of the tracks we've got is called Communicate and Lead, and it's really about that part, right? It's really about that aspect of how do you take all this great information you now have and help lead your organization or lead your team with it, right? So I'm with you.
I think that kind of parlays pretty well into my topics, which are categorized as, I think, visualize or something like that, but they're really communicate and lead type things. And so the first one is create an effective reporting strategy. It's kind of ironic that you brought up Netflix, because Netflix will be one of my examples. Or how do you go about identifying the type of leader that there is in the organization? Right, whether that's an analytic leader or not an analytic leader, to determine what sort of strategy you should have in attacking the rollout of your tools, including Excel and including your databases, the entire technology layer, the reporting layer, and all of that sort of stuff. So not only identifying what type of leader is there in the organization, but identifying your approach based on what you find. And there's kind of and I'll go through this, so people who are die-hard kind of business intelligence people. I'm a TDWI guy. So die-hard business intelligence people will say, okay, well, I kind of already understand what a business intelligence maturity model is, Rick. Thank you. But we're gonna go through each of the individual layers and why it is that you have low adoption, why it is that people aren't adopting your tools, why it is that you're struggling and you've rolled out millions of dollars worth of tools and just nobody's using it, and who you need to get on your side. And guess what? It's usually the Excel people. It's usually the analysts. So we're going to talk through that quite a bit. We're also going to get to some of the higher level stuff, so that I'm not necessarily talking to the data scientists in the room. So but what we will talk to is, whenever we talk about prediction, what do we mean? We'll walk through a very simple regression model And we'll put that in the context of Six Sigma, y equals f of x, and we'll talk about prediction, what that means, and what you need to be able to create in your prediction model so that you can actually change your business. So you can change the inputs, you can change the root cause driver. So that'll be a good portion of that conversation. Number two, though, the second topic I'll talk to is more of a hands-on, right? And this is a little bit more detailed. The first conversation is much higher level, is talking to executives and directors. The next one is talking to the guy on the ground. And it's called Making Informed Decisions, Guidelines for Creating Effective Dashboards. Now, this is very much a how do you do it, right? And I'm going to bring up, I think it's 6 or 7 steps. I'm going to bring up about 7 steps. And I'm going to bring up examples of how you go about determining what needs to be on your dashboard. And here's what most people do, right? Most analysts, most people who are trying to figure out what's going to be on their dashboard, they'll go and knock on the executive's door, and they'll say, hey, what you want on your dashboard? The problem with that is that's not very proactive, right? You're waiting on someone else to give you the information. So what I'm going to show you how to do is how to be proactive. How can you walk into that office, walk into that meeting, and act like you have your stuff together? Know when to bring in an annual report into that meeting and when not to. Because if you do, just that decision right there could be a killer. And I'll walk through real-life examples of where I've made those mistakes. And, and the appropriate. And additionally, there's like 6 or 7 steps in creating this. I don't even get to the actual build. The furthest I get into that is building your mock-ups for your dashboards, and what are some best practices. We'll show Excel examples. And here's the cool thing about this one, though, is in this one I'm going to bring up for each individual tip. This isn't a, hey, you need to get these 6 or 7 data elements, for your requirements. What it is I'm going to bring up the Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to show you, get this, fill out this spreadsheet. And these are the sort of data elements you need for your dashboard. Here's how you determine the sorts of reports that need to come after you build your dashboard. And so how do you create a strategy around that? So that's going to be much more hands-on. There'll be real-life examples. So any thoughts?
Yeah, it's almost like, whether it's like the executive or, the lower-level person, it's, people don't know where to start. They see the data in front of them, and they're like, what do I do with it? Or I've been tasked to make a dashboard. Where do I go from here? So it's very interesting. So it's about communicating, but also leading the charge, right? So it fits really well into that track, I would think.
I like when you're talking about knowing what kind of leader you have. That is so important because because you definitely want your stuff accurate, right? But I remember the one analyst who trained me. He came out of an office with an executive, and he was all shook up. And he said that guy he is scary because he can do this crazy math in his head. He looked at the analyst paper, and he's like doing the math. He said, that should be about 17%, and you got 24% in here. What is this? He threw his papers back at him. How do you calculate 17.5% in your head?
Honestly, even just take the Netflix example, right? The Netflix example. The reason it's going in that direction, you can take Amazon, and you can take others as well. The reason they're going in the direction they're going, there's a very good book on this, which I'll leave in the comments section below. So this is an original thinking by Rick. So some good books on this. Wow. But the CEO, what's his name, Reed Hastings, I believe, of Netflix. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but hey, this guy has, I believe it was a master's degree in ops management, or the decision science where you're doing, where you're building optimization models.
Operations research, right?
But this guy has a master's degree in this stuff, if I recall correctly. The same thing with Jeffrey Bezos of Amazon. I mean, this guy was working on a quant team, if I remember, on Wall Street. Before he started. I mean, so there are, and this is very, very minute part of your executive leaders who are ready to do this. And because us as analysts, that's the way we think. Mm-hmm. We think all of our leaders should think that way too. And the truth is, quite a large portion of our leaders don't think that way. Right. They see analysis, and they see it all as not that you're building an asset, they see that you're trying to reduce that expense. How can we automate this report? How they're concerned. So we're going to talk about how do you figure that out? How do you figure it out real quick? And what should your strategy be on either way?
Yep, and where I was going with this is, contrasting this against somebody else who was very much a people person. And so I dealt with him in a different kind of way, where when he would go in with my numbers, I really had to have things tight, because if he went in there and had a problem, he was going to be embarrassed. He wasn't going to be able to do stuff in his head and figure it out there in a meeting. He was going to come back to me. He's going to be mad with me and then embarrassed with them. So understanding those different kinds of leadership, it's very important.
How about you, Oz? You're speaking as well.
Well, no, I'm wondering if Denise has some comments about yours, and I've got more.
Well, so what I was thinking as Rick was talking was that it's true that there's definitely a variance in terms of executive leaders and how much they understand why data is important, but I think more and more they're looking around and seeing that the organizations that know how to do things with their data are going to beat them, or are beating them, right? So then the people in their organizations who can help them with their data, who can explain it to them, you just have to find the way to do it. They're going to become more and more valuable. And I think that's why, it's a bottoms-up approach, right? But I think it can be really powerful.
Yeah, but what I think about it in response to that is coming across businesses where things are good enough. Let them beat us. There's enough for everybody, and I'm not trying to get it all. I've got my BMW, and the bills are paid, and okay, and I'll continue to just guess at what the numbers are, and I'll check the inventory by going to look in the bin.
Works so far.
So what my response is to that? I think you're right, Oz, but then I'd say there's plenty of other opportunities for people who really dig data, who have the passion for making value out of data, for working with data. There are places where that skill is valued more than you can imagine. And that's just more and more in demand all the time, right? So from a personal perspective in your own career, right? People should. I think people who work with data, who are Excel pros, who know how to munge and get value out of data, their future is very rosy, because the demand is just increasing beyond what they even realize.
Wow.
And you can come to the conference and meet each other and network and learn more about that.
That's right. That's right.
How about you, Oz?
Well, mine is the pain and glory of data preparation, because managing data is a sport. There's pain in it. There's glory in it. There's the pain when you mess up somebody's money and they come choke you and they kick your desk. There's glory when you turn things around, when you get insights and open things up and lead people into the sunlight. But this is taking me back to where I started dealing with data, because it started with people calling up mad about something, and I'm digging around, and I gave myself the permission to get up off my desk and go dig into this data. That was not my job, and I kept getting in trouble for it, but I got tired of these people calling too. So I just took the risk, and you'd find out somebody's got 8 profiles in the data. Cleaning that stuff out, peeling things away from each other, item codes from the item, all of that kind of stuff. So this is where, see, you pretty guys with your dashboards and stuff, y'all are up on the front, right? Right, y'all get to interviews in the locker room after the game. But then who did all the dirty stuff? Who did that dirty stuff to peel all that stuff out? People putting nicknames and stuff in mixed with their regular name. Somebody's got to peel that stuff out so that the pretty folks can make their dashboards and get all the glory in the interviews. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Talking about Power Query and some of the powerful things that are in Power Query that can help you start parsing lines of text, unpivot. What else? We'll talk about quite a few things there that help you get your data clean. When data comes at you looking like a report, how do you get it into just a big wall of rows and columns? You know, the data looked like it was made for printing labels. Okay, I need sortable rows and columns, not blocks of data. So, it's important because, for one, it's not taught. Because when you go to learn analytics, you don't spend a month cleaning data and then do your 3-day analytics course. No, that makes no sense. So it's understandable. But then a person takes the 3-day analytics course or the semester-long analytics course and then get out into the world and, oh, we just broke all this information out of a PDF. Here you go. Make me a pretty dashboard. Okay.
So if I'm allowed to say this, I have to say Oz's session title is one of my favorites at the conference.
Right.
Pain and Glory Data Preparation. But this is such an important, so here's the thing, right? You're exactly right. Most analysts will tell you they spend far more time finding the data and making sense out of it than they do the actual analysis and visualization, right? Because it's so messy, right? It's so messy. And anything that can help you cut that time by increasing your productivity is going to be extremely valuable, because it's one thing is drudge work, for another thing there's always more of it to do, right? So yeah. I expect that if people go to your session, Oz, that they're going to pick up some tips, right, where that'll make them better at it, right, and allow it to go a little bit faster.
Yep. And that's a great point where you say that the analysis can be pretty easy, but getting it out, that's the hard part. And I did a session at a medical school with his postdoc students with all his genome information. You know, one person, she needed a single formula, but it had to be nested in the right way, and it needed to have the absolute and relative cell references set right, and then she could drag across and down, and her data cleansing was done. That's all she needed. But you know, until I got there to do that session with them, she could lose a whole day moving that stuff around. So it's about, you know, increasing productivity.
Mm-hmm. And for so many people, like your example, who are working with data, that's not their actual job, right? Her job was a research position or something, but she needed the data in order to do her job. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people like that in all kinds of fields.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a pretty boy, as a good-looking dashboard pretty boy, I got to say a few things on this. All right. So let me just say this, all right, because I don't actually really disagree with Oz, but I cut my teeth on data wrangling. I didn't just start out in dashboards. In fact, you find out the best ones out there, you know, the people who really know what they're doing, they'll tell you that that's where they started. I landed in dashboards because I became the guy who knew how to fix the data. Everyone else was just jumping in. They're like, oh, this doesn't work. And they'd say, oh, well, what's the problem? When we'd go trace it back and say, oh, well, Jacob, you know, Smith exists in here 9 times. Why does he and here he's got 2 C's in his name, you know? This is how I started out. Right. So I'm just saying, you know, this is important skills, because this is like the stuff that they go, oh, well, that's on the job. Oh, you'll learn that as you go. Well, some people learn terrible habits as they go. They learn to ignore it. They don't learn how to fix it. They learn to ask their buddy who's going to get that next promotion instead of them. So I think this is a good talk, because why aren't we teaching this in class? Well, you know, why isn't this part of it?
One thing is, there are some things that you'll do one time in life ever. So you really got to think about the tools that you have, the way that you can weave them together and set things up, and think 10 steps ahead. Right? And have a strategy to where you clear the low-hanging fruit out of the way, and then you just start working your way through it, rather than, you know, because, you know, I saw somebody last week, they started building this massive formula that was going to do everything in one drag down. No, no. Maybe you take half of this and deal with this because it's all the same, but you got to think about how can I look at this to see what is all the same and deal with that. That's strategy, and you never know. You break something out of a PDF, you don't know how it's going to look, but you got to know that when you put your helmet on, it is not going to whoop you when you get that on the field.